Just walking over to my wood shop. I got a few branches to clean up out here. So my wife and I are going to need a little bit more room in the back seat than what her Jeep and my car can give. So I've been looking for a project truck, and you know, I wanted something that I can hang on to for quite a while. Of course, we live in a sort of a rust belt area, so it's a little tough getting something that's older, you know. But on the other hand, you look at the price of new trucks, and the very base models start in the 30s. This is Canadian, of course. They start in the 30,000 range, and really, you know, it doesn't take too much. You put extended cab and four-wheel drive and AC and power locks and power windows on the thing, and before you know it, you're up to $45,000-$50,000 truck. And you know, I've seen a couple of trucks new now. They're in the $90,000 range. $90,000. How do you spend $90,000 on a vehicle? I don't know. But that's not the kind of money that we have around here. And if we did, we certainly wouldn't be spending it on a vehicle. Now, don't get me wrong, my wife and I, we love our vehicles. She's got an old Jeep. That thing is a bit of a tank. It's a YJ. We have rebuilt various things on it, and it is a lot of fun. It is fun when you take the top off. It is fun when the weather's bad. It's fun when the weather's good. You know, aside from maybe if you're having to sit in traffic somewhere, otherwise it's pretty good. When it gets to where we're on the highway at winter, and if it's, you know, minus 30 or colder, it can't keep up. The heater just cannot heat that single-walled cabin. That space just cools way too quick. So we find that when it's minus 30 or colder, we default to the car because it can keep us warm. With the Jeep, it's not the end of the world, but you know, after about half an hour or so, you got to pull over because it's probably like minus 10 or so in the cab, and just let the cab warm up and let your hands thaw out a little bit. But it's not uncommon in the winter to have a layer of ice growing from the roof down of the Jeep. We used to have a nice T-Bird that we used to take to some car shows, and we even got to represent Ford once at a big car show in the area here, and so that was pretty cool. So, you know, it's not that we don't value vehicles and nostalgia and whatnot, but we also value our lifetime and our life energy that it takes to pay for something like that, which I think is probably a better overall view of how much something's going to cost you. You know, how many life hours, how many awake living hours are you going to spend to pay for that item? Now myself, I kind of have this well, I got multiple issues. But one of them is that I just like to get dirty, and I like to get into things, like to see how things work. And you know, if I haven't done it before, it's all the more reason to try it. So, you know, a project vehicle is no new idea for me. So I ended up I got myself an old red. I got a 07 F-150 FX4. It's got the flex fuel 5.4 in it. Very, very clean vehicle. It was really this guy's baby. He owned it for the last 10 years or so, and he just took great care of it. The body's straight, there's no rust. I mean, finding something with no rust, I mean, that alone is pretty tough around here. So I've got the right platform to work off of. Now, it does have that 3-valve 5.4 in it. Those things, you know, if you don't know much about them, you know, I certainly didn't know much about the inner workings of them, how they differed from the 2-valve previous version. But there is some extra voodoo that Ford puts in there, and they have some oiling issues in there, so it is not a it's not a very long-term reliable engine. Now that said, some people, they go hundreds of thousands of miles. You know, there are people online that'll tell you that they've got 200,000 miles on that 5.43 valve. I don't think that it's due to perfect service. So anyways, this is her, and she's clean, she's straight. It's going to be a great project. This guy's really taken nice care of his truck. And that's something that I really identify a lot with. I don't think the person has to have a fancy vehicle, but I think you need to take good care of what you do have. So this should be an excellent vehicle for a family. I've never been inside of a 3-valve 5.4 at all. The local machine shops here don't really want to talk about them. They don't really want them in their shop. Um, and I can understand why. I can, from the research I've been doing on them, they can be quite finicky. The top end will have oiling issues when things wear out. From what I understand, the cam bearings are in place in the heads. So in order to fix any bearing issue that was caused by any oiling deficiencies, that's a line bore job. And apparently these heads are just real finicky to get to come back together and work properly. So anyways, yesterday I popped the hood and started taking a look around. I've read codes on it a couple times. I'm getting multiple different codes. If I were to have kept track of all the codes, I've probably got close to 20 different codes on it. But it throws different codes at different times. One thing that's for sure is that number 3 cylinder and number 8 cylinder are both down. So we thought we'd take a look at number 3, and long story short, I was able to get the plug out of number 3. There's spark, there's fuel. So then I threw a compression tester on it. We pulled 145 psi. That's definitely enough compression to fire this thing. So if you have spark, fuel, and compression, the only thing really that can be left is a timing issue. So I started suspecting that maybe this chain has skipped a tooth or whatnot, but that didn't sit right with me because of the fact that some of the cylinders seem to be working absolutely fine, no issues. And then yet there's a couple that are completely gone. And that doesn't sound like a timing chain skip issue to me. So I wasn't too sure what was going on there. One thing I found is typically you want to do a compression test more than once if you are looking at a problem cylinder or something in specific that you know there's a problem there with. And I did, and so we did another 4 or 5 compression tests on it. Every time it was coming up at 0. A couple times it bumped up to 5 or so, 5 psi, maybe 10, but basically nothing. The only thing that I know of that can cause that problem is a valve that's stuck open. I'm not expecting a valve that to be broken or too much internal carnage inside of this because it was an intermittent compression issue. I wouldn't be surprised if the head has been so inadequately oiled by the system that Ford has in here that the valves are they're wearing out in the guides and they're starting to stick, they're starting to hang up. But I mean, that's speculation at this point. It is possible that there's a broken valve spring. I've not seen a situation where there's a broken valve spring on one cylinder on each side of the head at the same time. I'm not saying it can't happen, just haven't come across it. It's an FX4, doesn't have the locking rear diff in it that I know some FX4s have. I'm not sure if that was an option. It may be that it was an option and it wasn't optioned on. May also be that that didn't come until later. I know that those are showing up in the 2010 and newer, so I'm not sure if an 07 like this could have had that. But that is something that I may look into putting in later on. I found that people who've had good luck with these engines really think that there's something good. But of course, it's a very small sample size. There's people who have 1 or 2 of these trucks and that they haven't had any issues, which I think is excellent. I don't want to see any particular company have big issues. And then there's the other camp who have had issues that curse and swear and say that this is the worst engine that ever came out of Ford. Now, I don't think that's possible. I would say if you think this is the worst engine that's ever come out of Ford, I would take another little look at some of the things like the 1980s 2.9, the 6-liter, and yet don't Don't send me mail saying the 6 liter and the 6.4 are great. All you got to do is a little bit of work on the turbo and throw in some new studs and some this and that and what. Okay, that's great. But in my opinion, if you just drop 60,000 on a truck, you should not be expected to put another 5 to 10,000 to make it run properly. Comes with a seat right on the front, which I think is really cool. Anytime I can sit down, I'm almost a millennial. I'm a little bit older than them, but not by too much. So I still kind of have that sit down whenever I can instinct sort of bred into me. So about my background, when I'm going through a project like this is going to be one of the more extensive projects. I've tend to have done more fabrication projects or transfer cases, setting up rear ends, transmissions, that type of thing. I've done engine components, but I've never done a complete through and through rebuild. In high school and then coming out of high school, I worked for an independent auto shop. There were some real top-notch techs in there. I learned a lot. I really recommend to anybody who wants to start picking this type of thing up, find yourself a good independent shop. Try to find a shop with 10 or less people in it and, hang out with them for a while. The first year you're just going to be a grease monkey, but after a little while, if the techs start to realize that you're serious about your stuff, and if you treat their tools, if they loan you a tool and you treat it like it's gold plated, they'll start opening up to you. And I got a lot of learning, a lot of education that way, without paying for it, while actually getting paid while on the job. From that independent shop, I went and started working in the heavy equipment industry, both as fixing and operating. That was an excellent education at bushcraft, getting things to work for the moment and also doing longer term fixes. Heavy equipment is great in that there's a lot of stuff that breaks. There's a lot of welding and fabrication and hydraulic systems and electrical systems and 12s and 24 volts and solenoids, and you really get a pretty good overall well-rounded experience working in a heavy equipment type of setting. And then from there I went and worked at a major dealership that was not a Ford dealership. There at that dealership I was probably about at a third year apprentice level. Here we have a 4-year apprenticeship before you then can take your master's certificate. They call the Red Seal. I sort of go by the idea that if it can be learned, there's a pretty good chance that I can learn how to do it. I'm pretty well equipped as far as general mechanics tools. I don't have a hoist, something I've thought about and toyed with over and over. Haven't put one in, probably still not going to. My wife and I will be moving to another place in the future, and that's probably when we'll get a hoist in. But hey, you never know. If the right deal comes up or I have a real need all of a sudden, just might do that. So what's the plan for this beast? Well, it's going to get yanked out. Whether I rebuild it or swap something different in, one way or another it's coming out. I want to do a complete assessment on it and have a very good idea of what's been going on in there, if the heads are junk or if they're salvageable. I want to check the bottom end. I want to check the cylinder conditions. Even using my tech pricing on parts, there's many thousands of dollars worth of parts in here to rebuild 5.4 to do it properly. So one of the things I'm considering doing is looking at dropping a set of new 2-valve heads on top of this. If it looks like the block is great, we'll do a quick refresh of the bottom end and maybe drop on 2-valve heads. Might have to do a little bit of something to the confuser to make sure that we can fool it into thinking that there are cam phasers that are doing what they're supposed to do there. Usually there's a way we can figure out around this kind of stuff, so I'm not too worried about that. Another option might be to put in a 4.6. I know some people feel that 4.6s are dogs. I personally don't feel that way. I think if you were towing this thing at its max, if you were towing 9,000 pounds all the time with this, a 4.6 would probably not be the right choice for you. Uh, but the reality is, most of the time, this thing is going to be either hauling a light load or no load. And with that in mind, a 4.6 would do just fine. I had an '02 F-150 that had a 4.6 in it. It was no slouch. It did just fine, and it doesn't take too much to add a little extra horsepower in them if you so desire. Of course, there is the possibility that something wild might happen. You know, there just might happen to be a different definition of the flex fuel engine. I would love to drop a diesel in here. I've long since been a diesel enthusiast. I've owned 5 different Dodges with Cummins turbo diesels in them between the years as back far as '93, where there was the old square body, up through to 2008 with the new 6.7 and most variations in between. I think they are excellent engines. I don't think Dodge builds the best truck around it. But you know, that said, every manufacturer is having their issues these days. Am I going to drop a 5.9 Cummins in here or a 6.7? No, not a chance. Could you do it? Sort of. You know, technically, yes, you could. You could put it in here and you could make a truck run. Would it be a good idea? No, certainly not. A modular engine like this 5.4 is going to weigh around 500 pounds, you know, maybe 550, somewhere in that realm. A Cummins 5.9 is going to weigh around 1,100 to 1,200 pounds, depending on how it's dressed. That's a huge weight difference. 700 extra pounds on the front of an F-150 is just not a good idea. There's no two ways about it. Yes, you could do things to make it work. If you're going to go that route, though, my thought is get a 3/4 ton or 1 ton right off the bat. You'll already be working with a suspension and steering setup that is tailored to handle something heavier like a 5.9. If this thing were to get a diesel, we'd be looking at something like a Mercedes OM 606, or we'd be looking at maybe a 4BT. I'm a little more comfortable with the all-mechanical diesels, just for obvious reasons. They're so darn simple. It's almost impossible to kill one, and even if one does die, unless it puts a rod through the side of the block out in the bush, you can usually bypass whatever you need to and still make it home with one. That's something you're never going to hear a Ford 6.0 or 6.4 owner say. Sorry guys, but come on, you gotta sometimes laugh at that engine a little bit. I'll be harping on that engine a bit too, but don't forget, keep in mind, I got my own pile of junk right here. So it'll be an interesting project. I'll bring you along with it. I have no idea how many parts it's going to be. I don't know where we're going to go from here. I'm just going to start off by looking at what we got and, pulling this thing out, pulling heads off, seeing where we're at, and then we'll make some educated decisions from there. So that's about all the promises I can make with this project. It'll be an ongoing thing. I'm going to be doing this some in my spare time. This is not something that I'm going to be working straight through at and taking time off of other things to do it. I've got lots going on around here, and my stuff's not the only stuff that needs to get fixed around here. So I have to keep that in mind as well. But, hopefully we'll get 10 hours or so on this a week. And we'll see where we end up. I'm really interested to see what the inside of this thing looks like right now. At the end of the day, reliability is going to be big. Anyways, guys, that's the update for now. That's what we're going to be seeing in the upcoming weeks. The rest of them are going to be seeing more dirty hands and a lot less talking. But I just wanted to do sort of this overview, sort of intro into what this project's going to be all about. Anyways, as always, from Finn and I, you guys have yourselves a great one. Stay dirty, have some fun, and we'll talk to you later.